How's it going, everyone? Gill here. Hopefully, the 39th meeting between Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal is upon us in the Indian Wells semifinal tomorrow. I'm going to get into that in this video, and I say hopefully because if you've been following and if you watched Rafa Nadal's quarterfinal matchup against Karen Khachanov, you would know that his patellar tendonitis in his right knee, I want to say, it's in both knees, so who cares what knee it's in this time, but it has flared up. I'll also get into the other semifinal match, Milos Raonic, Dominic Thiem. That'll be a lot shorter. 95% of this video will be about Federer and Nadal because, wow, we have waited long enough. It's been many a months now, over a year, since we've seen these two play. The last time Federer played Nadal was October of 2017 in Shanghai. So it's been a long time coming, and we'll see. You know, Rafa is going to wake up tomorrow morning and decide if he's going to give it a go. I think it's likely he says shouldn't do this, can't risk it, or can't compete 100% because you don't want to take a tennis court in front of 15,000 people and not be able to give it 100%. Or retire after 4 games. It's just not worth it. So good chance Rafa wakes up tomorrow morning and says, I can't go. We hope that he wakes up tomorrow morning and is feeling okay. The positive is that towards the end of the second set against Khachanov, Nadal started to look a little bit better. So before I get into this rivalry and how things play out on the court between these two, I want to talk about the injury in general because I think it's important to just address that right off the bat, and then I want to ignore it after I'm done addressing it. This patellar tendonitis, it's not going to go away. I said it in my season preview. It's going to be something that Rafa's going to grapple with for the rest of his career until he retires. It's a lot worse on hard court than it is on clay court because the surface is a lot less forgiving on the knee. Even grass courts are more forgiving than hard courts. History tells us that it's not something that just goes away. And the last time Nadal's tendonitis flared up, it was the US Open. And we saw it gradually get worse and worse as the tournament went on until he had to retire against Juan Martín del Potro. So history tells us this isn't just going to go away and it'll slowly get worse. History also tells us that it's not something that is suddenly going to be debilitating for Nadal. So it's going to be, it's painful, and it's something that until it gets really bad, he can play through. The third thing is that history tells us is generally when Nadal's tendonitis flares up, it's time to take a break for him. He takes some time off. Sometimes it's a month. Sometimes it's as long as 3 months. And he comes back good as new and gets back to winning tennis. So that's what this injury is. That's what this injury has signaled for Nadal in the past. So that's, just something to keep an eye on. I'd say the chances he plays Miami at this point, 5-10%, probably won't play Miami. So let's see what happens here. For this video, I kind of want to ignore the knee. I kind of want to just talk about Federer and Nadal and tactics because that's what these previews are about. Who cares if the match happens or if it doesn't happen? I mean, well, not who cares. That kind of came out wrong. It's like whether or not the match happens or doesn't happen, maybe let's not dwell on that here and let's just talk about Federer and Nadal because we haven't really got to do that in a while. We've gotten to talk about them individually, but not against each other. So, hopefully we get to, after this, watch them take the court, watch them play, and then I'll get to recap it and talk about what happened in the match. But if not, there's no point in basically saying, well, let's forget about it because Nadal might be injured, so Federer is definitely going to win, and it's not worth talking about. Essentially, that's what I'm trying to say, is I think it's worth still talking about even though it might not be a match. Okay. Traditionally in this matchup, we've reached the part where I'm going to start ignoring his knee. Traditionally in this matchup, it's been about conditions. Rafa leads the head-to-head 23-15. Federer leads the head-to-head on hard court 11-9. When it comes to Indian Wells, it's a little bit murky because, yes, it's a hard court, but it's so slow that I'd say it muddies the waters a little bit. It's okay. Who sh- who what who do these conditions favor? And that question becomes a little bit harder to answer when it comes to Indian Wells. Roger Federer leads the head-to-head at Indian Wells 2-1. He had the dominant win in 2017 in straight sets. It was one of the best matches that Roger Federer has probably ever played. That's my opinion. I don't know if you guys agree. In 2013, Nadal won quite decisively. In 2012, Federer won quite decisively. So they haven't played a close match here. It's been nothing but blowouts, 1 for Nadal, 2 for Federer. But in general, before Federer rattled off 5 straight matches, and Federer has won the last 5 straight matches against Nadal, this was a positive head-to-head for Nadal. It was a head-to-head that was indicative of a matchup that's difficult for Roger Federer, not just because Nadal is an elite player, but also because tactically it was difficult for Federer. So let's talk about, I think, a couple of things that were at play. One, in neutral rallies, it was the ability for Nadal to find Federer's backhand and kick it up high on Federer's backhand. I know I just spent a really long time talking about Tsitsipas and his one-hander and how he struggles with the high backhand. And for Federer, it was a similar thing with Nadal when it came to kind of your neutral cross-court rally. It was a lot of the time Federer having a lot of trouble getting away from the cross-court or having any success on the cross-court pattern, Federer's backhand to Nadal's forehand. And when there's a cross-court pattern that's extremely problematic, it becomes difficult to win neutral rallies. It's very, it doesn't bode well to have one cross-court pattern where you're in big trouble. And Federer had that against Nadal. The other thing I think is Federer's backhand return. Nadal directed most of his serves at Federer's backhand. Because he's a lefty, it's a little bit easier for him to find the Federer backhand. And Federer's kind of tendency to just kind of block his backhand return and, his not inability, but his tendency to not be very aggressive with it allowed Nadal to usually open up the point with the forehand and dictate straight away. The other thing is Federer slices his backhand a lot. And against Nadal, it's simply ineffective. With very few exceptions, Nadal destroys slice. And that's because, I guess, what's great about slice, the advantage of slice, or one of the main advantages of slice is, well, the ball stays low. And for most players, that means they need to hit up on it. And it requires a lot of RPM on the ball to get the ball to dip back down. And for most players who can't create and generate that kind of RPM, the topspin on the ball, well, they can't hit slice very hard. It's a shot where they have to hit up, and it's hard for them to hit a really strong ball off of Roger Federer's nasty slice. Nadal, so much acceleration, so much topspin, that he can scrape the ball off the ground and still do a lot of damage. He's able to get the ball to dip down so easily that Nadal can easily attack Federer's backhand slice. So whether it was kicking it up high on Federer's backhand, whether it was getting Roger Federer and attacking his slice backhand, attacking Federer's backhand return, basically Nadal would pick on that side. That wasn't the entire story tactically of their matches. Obviously, Federer was able to win a lot of matches. There was a lot more at play. But I think that was one thing that Rafa could kind of go back on. The two other things is Nadal was much more likely to be able to win on both offense and defense, where Federer was a little bit less likely to win as many points on defense against Nadal. So Nadal was a little bit more of an all-court player in that respect when he was so elite defensively, and he still had the big forehand. The other thing is Rafa Nadal was generally playing a little bit cleaner than Roger Federer. And what I mean by that is just less unforced errors. He was also the less aggressive player. When Federer was winning, it was, well, he was serving better. He was taking, the racket out of Nadal's hands with just brilliant offensive displays. And, you saw that especially on grass courts in a lot of their meetings. What changed in 2017? Well, what I have up here are some of the stats from Federer playing Nadal at the Australian Open in 2017. Federer hit 219 topspin backhands. So topspin or flat. 219 backhands he hit over it. He sliced it 25 times. That's 8% of his backhands sliced. Or actually, no, that might be 8. Sorry, that's 8% of his shots. 8% of his shots were sliced backhands. But 25 slice, 219 rather, topspin. He realized, I got to take this out of the playbook. I need to basically play like I'm allergic to my backhand slice. He's going to do it sometimes. Chip and charge, load in Nadal's backhand. That's a great play. Sometimes defensively, he needs to do it. That's fine. But for the most part, when it comes to trading, I'm throwing the slice out the window. The second thing is in 2017, Federer just got a lot, and there's three things. The second thing is Federer got a lot more aggressive on his backhand return. So I mentioned Rafa normally directs his serves at Federer's backhand. Here's your stats. In the Australian Open final, Federer hit 91 backhand returns, and he hit 51 forehand returns. Let me make sure that's correct. On the ad side, he hit 42 backhands and 10 forehands. So especially on the ad side, everything with the backhand. All of these stats courtesy of Tennis Abstract's match charting project. It's tremendous. I love this. Federer turned a corner in 2017 where he realized, okay, I'm going to sit on this out wide serve, especially on the outside, and I'm going to be aggressive on my backhand return because Nadal's serve just isn't that big. And I can't allow Nadal to hit first serves between 112 and 120 miles per hour. By the way, it's a little bit higher right now. But I can't allow Nadal to hit serves at that speed, and I'm not going to do much with it. I need to do more on the ad side, open up with an aggressive backhand, rush Nadal, and now not only have I hit an aggressive return, but I'm on the ad side of the court. I can set up the next ball with my forehand. It works out really nicely for Federer. The third thing is court position. And Nadal was no longer able to kick the ball above Federer's shoulder because Federer stepped inside the baseline and simply took it on the rise before the ball even got that high. So those three things, no more slice, more aggressive return, and stepping in and taking it on the rise. Those three things turned the matchup around for Federer in 2017. So now that we have all that, let's talk about this match. And this was kind of tough for me. Of course, the injury makes Federer a heavy favorite. But before the injury even happened, I was kind of going back and forth. I want to start with Rafa and the ways that I think that Rafa could win. Or here are some arguments that Rafa would win this match at 100% or will win this match if he's 100%. First of all, he's played better tennis over the last two seasons. I think last year, he pretty much played consistently when he was healthy better tennis than Roger Federer. I think this year, early on, I think Federer looked great in Dubai, great in Hopman Cup, but based on the Australian Open form, which I'd say is the most important, and that is probably the most indicative, I would kind of give the edge to Nadal in form. The second thing is Federer's backhand to me, is not like it was in 2017. His return, rather. And by the way, if you'll allow me to get a little more technical, it's not just a matter of Federer being more aggressive on the backhand return and also stepping in and taking the ball on the rise. I think as a stroke, his backhand got flatter, and that will lend itself a little bit more to taking the ball on the rise when you can come on top of the ball. It's very hard to take the ball on the rise and hit topspin. Like, that's just because of physics, because the ball is going up. It's hard to hit up on it, if you know what I mean. So really, it's about coming on top of it. I mean, Federer does this so well on his forehand side. If you stop and you go slow motion, I'm going to use my phone. When Federer takes the ball on the rise on his forehand side, his racket head is just about closed off on the ball, right? Because the ball's coming up, and his racket face, it's closed off on the ball. And that's what you have to do to take the ball on the rise, come on top of it. Federer's backhand, it used to be much more brushing up on the ball, and that's why it was a little bit tougher for him. It was either heavy topspin or it was slice. It got a lot easier for him to step in, take the ball on the rise, and it became a lot easier for him to be aggressive on the return when he flattened out that stroke. But to me, since 2017, the backhand return hasn't been where it was in 2017. That's advantage Rafa. That makes it seem like, okay, well, maybe it'll go back to how it was before 2017 with this matchup. And then the third thing, I think this is still true that Nadal is more likely to play a clean match. And this is something that I've said when Djokovic has played Nadal, and I think Djokovic is more likely to play a clean match. And Djokovic, if one player is going to be off their game, I think it's more likely that it's Nadal when those two play. When Nadal plays Federer, I think it's a little bit more likely that Federer's off his game. This just comes down to high percentage tennis. Federer does not really play that. Nadal plays it a little bit more. Djokovic plays it the most high percentage tennis. That has its pitfalls, but one of its main advantages is if your timing is slightly off, if you're a step slow, if it's just not really your day, you're more likely to still play okay if you play a lot of high percentage tennis. So those are kind of three things, and especially the first one's very important, that I think that Rafa's been in better form. That kind of led me to think, okay, I like the kind of offensive tennis that Rafa's been playing, and I think he's got a good shot. Now let me flip it, and let me talk about some of the things that Federer, some of the things that make me think that Federer would have had the edge here. One, I think that there's one aspect of Rafa's return, or I just gave it away. There's one aspect of Rafa's game that has not been quite consistent with his pivot to more aggressive play. His backhand has become more aggressive. His court position, I would say, in neutral rallies has become more aggressive. His forehand is bigger. He hits it with more urgency. All these things are true. His return is the same as it was, though, in like 2010 when he was one of the fastest players on tour. Probably was the fastest player on tour. Murray was quite fast as well back then. And Djokovic was also quite fast back then. All three of them lightning fast. But when Rafa had that high-end speed, he would return from very far back, and his philosophy on the return games was more of let me kind of grind it out a bit on my return games, wear down my opponent. On the service games, well, he was more likely to use his forehand in a more aggressive manner. Rafa hasn't changed the way he returns. He's still far back. He's still playing aggressive on second serve returns by taking really big cuts. But on the first serve, he's still giving up a lot of court position. When he played Karen Khachanov just now, he gave up a lot of court position, and Khachanov could not finish. The courts were too slow, the conditions were too heavy, and Rafa's movement, to his credit, I think it's looked better, by the way, than it did against Kyrgios in Acapulco. I think Nadal's movement, until the injury, looked pretty good. Khachanov couldn't finish the points. When he would venture to the net, his volleys weren't good enough. Nadal was winning a a pretty high percentage of points when Khachanov went to the net. And when Khachanov was trying to slug away at his ground strokes, the conditions were too heavy. Khachanov couldn't hit through Nadal, who was a lot of the time playing very far back. I was watching that and I was thinking, this won't happen with Federer, because Federer's going to do a lot better job of taking time away and not letting, and kind of taking Nadal out of position, where Khachanov was not taking time away and was trying to stand behind the baseline and just bash the ball hard enough to hit it through Rafa. Was not working. The second thing is, Federer's just going to finish at net with Nadal this far back in the court. With Nadal giving up this much court position, Federer's going to finish a lot of points at the net, where Khachanov just doesn't have the net skills to do it. So one thing that I was kind of thinking, okay, like, I don't really like this for Rafa, and I like it for Federer, is that Nadal's court position for a hard court is still pretty far back. He's still giving up a lot of court position. In general, I think this matchup will be much more decided on who plays offense, especially more than it used to be. Again, when Nadal was just a better defender and honestly just a more prolific athlete. And if Rafa's giving up as much court position as he's routinely giving up, then, how is he expecting to dictate against a guy like Federer, who is so good at keeping points on his terms and staying on top of the baseline and finishing points quickly and, playing quick strike tennis? How can Rafa expect to dictate when he's giving up so much court position? So that's one thing. Another thing's the mental edge. First of all, Federer's won the last 5. Against Djokovic, we've seen Federer, I think, shrink in big moments. Against Nadal, I think there's reason to believe that he'll have enough confidence not to do that. The other thing is, I feel like largely Nadal has been on edge since his loss to Djokovic. You guys might disagree with me on this. In fact, I'd be willing to bet this is one point that some people will challenge me on. But to me, since he was really beat down in that final, I thought he was on edge against Kyrgios, obviously nervous in that third set tiebreak, and just looking, again, I think the best way to put it is, very, I guess, a little bit more hyper emotional for Rafa and on edge. And I thought he was on edge early on against Khachanov. And then, of course, I think he was on edge against Djokovic in the early stages, especially. So I feel like we've seen a bit of a panicky Rafa, uncharacteristically so, a little bit recently. So right now, as we have it, and I think traditionally maybe this hasn't been the case, at the moment, I kind of like Federer if I'm saying who has the mental edge here. Ditching the chip is another thing that, again, I feel like Federer understands this now. Federer gets that he needs to, that he can't slice his backhand against Nadal. He used the slice a ton against Hurkacz. So a lot of things, I was watching the semifinal match just now, and I had to watch it on replay. And I saw Federer just using so many plays with the slice backhand that I'm like, that won't work against Nadal. That won't work against Nadal. The thing is, I just think Federer knows that. I think Federer understands that. And then the last thing for Nadal is the thing that I'm questioning right now, the thing that I haven't quite seen, and I started to see it a little bit. I thought his movement was pretty good early in this tournament, but I'm still waiting to see if Nadal can defend at the elite level. He can certainly defend well enough to be a top 5 player in the world right now. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. But is he still an elite defender? Elite meaning I'm playing Djokovic, I'm playing Federer. Am I good enough is my defense good enough to steal points away from those guys? Is Nadal there right now? And I'm still kind of waiting to see that, because I was just shocked, taken aback, surprised at how little Nadal was able to defend against Djokovic in the Australian Open final. And then he played another, dare I say, elite offensive player in Kyrgios in Acapulco. Kyrgios is elite offensively. And again, I found myself thinking, Nadal's forehand is great. Nadal is doing a really good job dictating, which he's awesome at this stage in his career. But he's not really winning a lot of points on defense. If Nadal is not that elite defender, well, now he's kind of in Federer's domain. And is Federer going to lose to someone playing in his domain? That's all the factors. And if I weigh them kind of together, I kind of settled on Federer, and I'm only human. So the knee thing, I'm trying to ignore it. Maybe I can't, because again, I'm only human, and this is a fact that I know in my mind, and maybe I can't ignore it. But I think, just even assuming Rafa's 100%, I think I'm leaning Federer here. I think it's tough to predict. The conditions make this tough. The fact that they haven't played in so long makes this tough. And as always, hopefully we see the match, and I'm more excited to break down what's going to happen in the match or what happened in the match than I am what may happen in the match. Okay, that's it. I went 27 minutes, a lot different than my last video when I was kind of joking around and wanted to summarize all the matches. So yeah, I told you I can still blabber, or that I wasn't done blabbering. Quickly on Thiem and Raonic. I like Thiem. I know Thiem's the underdog in this, but I like Thiem. I think that Raonic is going to have trouble hitting through this court against Dominic, and I have more faith in Thiem's retrieval and his counterattacking from deep in the court than I do in Raonic's ability to finish consistently. I still don't think he's the most natural volleyer. I still think that when Thiem gets a look at second serves, that I really favor him to come through those baseline rallies, attacking Raonic's backhand with his inside-out forehand. Ultimately, if Raonic were to win this match, it would need to be on in my opinion, on a faster court where he's going to be able to play, or where he's not going to be able to have to hit so many consecutive strong forehands, or perhaps, have to rely on strong volleying to finish points. If it were a faster court, all it takes is kind of more of a 1-2. On this court, it takes a string of strong forehands. It oftentimes takes a tough volley in order to finish points, and I don't really have as much faith in Raonic's ability to be consistent there in big spots, as much faith as I do on these conditions as I do in Thiem, to make a tough passing shot here and there, to make Raonic play enough extra balls, and to to win any kind of long neutral rally. I mean, I heavily favor Thiem, and I think in games where Raonic will be forced to hit second serves, I think we'll get those long neutral rallies. That's all I got, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.